Maycha'al doesn't like the name Jesus. Yeah, what's going on, party people? The place to be. I go by the name of the BK Apologist, transmitting all the way live. New York is the city. Brooklyn is the borough. What's good? What's popping? Hope everybody's doing well. Of course, we gotta say what's up to the party people in the chat. We got Remy in the building. We got Tyler Lott. We got the real American Mr. Phil Fox on the check-in. Oh man, that's good. It's good. We got KJ in the building. And as always, if you have not yet already, please share the link, like, share, and subscribe. Tell a friend to tell a friend to tell two more friends about what's going down here with the BK Apologist. And if you like how it goes down with BK, you can show your appreciation via PayPal. The link is on top of the chat. Or if you'd like to be a monthly supporter of BK, you could become a patron where you get an assortment of goodies to enhance your personal Bible study. And so here we are, and we're with the plug, the mayor of Detroit himself, apologist in Detroit. What's going on, sir?
Party people, party people. Some good old Detroit house music from back in the 90s.
Yes.
Went back in the 90s when I was jitting. I used to know how to dance back in the day. I probably still know how to dance. I just look weird doing it. Probably look like Lane Dennis.
Well, Detroit is actually, if memory serves me correct, that is the origin of techno. Comes from Detroit. Yes,
house music.
People, no, that's Chicago.
House music, Chicago.
Okay. Techno is Detroit. So yes,
the digital
techno is black people music. Believe it or not. Yes. So fun fact there.
Yeah.
So how you doing, Mr. Apologist of Detroit?
I'm doing good. I just realized that my little workspace looks a little junky. Like I moved this camera. I originally had this camera sitting over here, and I would always be looking away from the camera. So I was like, I'm gonna put it in a traditional spot. And when I did, I was like, oh, I didn't realize these are my Hebrew Israelite signs over here. You don't keep the law signs, all that good stuff. And
well, it's kind of apropos for today's subject. So what brings me and Mr. Detroit here today is a while ago we did a video about the letter J, right? And it's called "This is brought to you by the letter J." It was a play on the whole Sesame Street motif, right? And many of you know, many have seen the memes about, well, the letter J didn't come into existence until 1500 years, to the year 1500. Therefore, Jesus is, either he did not exist or it's a different Jesus than the Jesus we find in Scripture. And I've been meaning to get around to do a video about that until a friend of mine's who used to go to the same church that I go to. He left. He got into the Seventh-day Adventist movement, and now I don't know what's the right word. I don't want to be disrespectful because I know he's very mindful of how people present him, which I totally respect. Yassaral, what we would call Israel. He is part of, an Israel movement that's in the Philippines. And I saw his testimony and his journey into this particular collective of people that he's a part of now started with the letter J. And I'm like, that is interesting. That is really interesting. So I said, so now it's like, okay, here's a guy who I'm cool with, a friend of mine's who left the gospel and is involved in this movement. And what got him into the movement was just the whole letter J thing that we hear in the internet. So I figured, well, now I definitely got to do a video about this because now I have something more vested than just debunking it. Now it's like there's somebody that I'm cool with that's involved in this kind of argumentation. So me and Chris, we decided to do a video about the letter J. And he knew about it, and every time he'll talk about the letter J, I'll put it in his chat, so he can see it. And I guess he got fed up with me, I guess, and decided to respond to this video. So, he's refuting the letter J, which is kind of interesting. Cause I don't know how one refutes the letter, right? But I knew what he meant. He's refuting my video about the letter J. And Chris, I don't know if you've seen any bit of that video. Have you?
Just a little bit of it. I watched the clips that we're gonna be talking about today, and then I just let it play a little bit, and caught a little more of it. And so, yeah,
Cool.
I watched some of it.
Right. So he does a video to refute our letter J video, and this will be our response to that video. So with that being said, do you have the video queued up?
I do. Give me 1 second.
Big up to D New, Bodega Ladies in the check-in.
All right, here we go. Let's go. Cue it up. Presenter video.
Please like, share, and subscribe. Please tell people about the video. We're live. We're all the way live. Let's get this place loaded with amazing people. And even if you're not so amazing, please come anyway.
Right.
So,
can you see it?
Yep.
All right. Yeah, all right.
Let's go.
All right. Let's go. Oh, make sure I don't have to do anything for the sound. Tell me if you can hear it.
Yep.
Cool.
There's an omega Thursday. There's a C, delta, beta.
The inscription is in Greek, the dominant language of the wealthy in Jerusalem in the 1st century AD. But what does it say?
Yahweh is God's name. Yahweh in Greek.
In English, it's pronounced Jehovah.
So that would be a verb. God is doing something.
Thinking long term about
man, these darn commercials.
And saving up for retirement can be even harder. You
Hold
make a
on.
plan early and save up, pero madalas, nauubos na sa day-to-day expenses. As time passes by, your money.
Good.
The team contacts Professor James Charlesworth to help decipher the Greek inscription.
You were supposed to arrive
Listen
yesterday,
now.
but you haven't
This
been
was
able to
written in Greek.
Yesterday would be no good.
We
But they never translated
read her yesterday, but we do today.
You're not going to come.
Are you teasing me? What?
Yeah, come on.
What have we got?
And in the middle area between the two rosettes, you've got this Greek inscription.
All right, I can read Yahweh. We have this in the Jewish magical papyri as a way of referring to Yahweh or God. So here you have it in Greek, in uncials, that means all caps, Yahweh. And above, I'm suggesting it might be Dios, God or Zeus is now Yahweh.
There you go.
So that would be related to the Greek word upsotheo, to raise up.
What? Yep, that's it.
Upsilon, C, and Omega. And that is uncio for upsao, which in the Gospel of John is used for the resurrection of Jesus. It's upsao. He is lifted up.
Yeah.
I am lifted up, says Jesus. I am lifted up. I am raised up. Upsao. And the rest, I'm not sure I can read. A lamath, pay.
Maybe an olive.
It could be an olive. Apo. Upsao. Apo Tuthanav, I would guess. From the dead.
The first two lines are clear. The first word is Dios, which can be read as Lord or God. The second word, Jehovah, the name of God in the Hebrew Bible. And then a word, upso, which can mean has raised, will raise, or is raising. And finally, three letters that are not clear. They could be referencing, as Professor Charlesworth sight read, the realm of death. But the last three letters may actually be A, G, B. The last word then could be Agba, the Hebrew equivalent of upso. In this case, the inscription is translinear. Greek, Hebrew, Greek, Hebrew.
The tomb predates the Great War with Rome in 66 to 73 AD. It was found in modern times by Professor James Tabor and his team during excavations. They said it was pronounced Yahweh or Jehovah, but how does the inscription really pronounce and what does it really say? What are you looking at are 4 lines of Greek text left by a family member of the deceased occupant of the Oshuwari tomb. Yes, I know it's Greek, but Greek was one of the languages that ancient Israelites spoke.
Yep, that's it. So he begins his refutation. Well, actually, before we get into that, a couple of points of order in this video that I would like to discuss before we get into it. So, in this video, he says that we are not friends, and that came as a shock to me because I did not know that we were not friends. You know, we weren't besties, but we knew of each other. Like I said, we was in the same church. Always thought he was a good guy. Great energy, very positive, bubbly personality. So, you know, he was very pleasant to be around. You know, I enjoyed every time he was in the fellowship, always enjoyed him, you know. So to hear him say that we're not friends, to be honest, it stung a little. It actually stung a little. And, you know, if you've been traveling with me throughout these YouTube streets, you know I've been called a lot of things. Right? I smoke synthetic weed. I eat pork, even though I've been plant-based for going on about 5 years. I work for the Jesuits, for Mossad, a COINTELPRO agent, all that, right? So, but you know, this is somebody I knew before I did anything on YouTube, you know. So to hear him say that we're not friends, yeah, that kind of hurt a little, to be honest. It really did. The second thing he mentioned, he didn't like the fact that I called him a Hebrew Israelite, right? Even though he says there are some similarities between what he believes and the Hebrew Israelites believe. There's a lot more similarities that he might not, you know, admit to. But, you know, I'm someone who believes in, you know, I'm going to call you by what you want to be called, because that's just a respect thing, right? So if he doesn't want to be called a Hebrew Israelite, I'm not going to call him that. Just like I hope he shares the same respect for me and stop calling me Alfredo Valentino. Because he kept calling me Valentino throughout the whole video. I don't understand how he came to that conclusion. He sees my name on Facebook. People say my name on my videos. You know, so I won't call you a Hebrew Israelite. Don't call me Valentino. My name is Alfredo Valentin. You can call me Alfredo Valentin. You call me Mr. Valentin, BK apologist, BK. You call me Fredo. You know, but but not Valentino. Okay, so just want to put that out there. So before I get into it, what are your initial thoughts about that particular clip, Chris?
Yeah. Okay. I mean, okay. On one hand, I have this immense sense of empathy for people who are genuinely want to pursue worshiping God and are trying to go about it in the best way they know how. So I have a genuine sense of empathy for people like that. That said, you know, immediately came to mind James 3. Not many of you should desire to become teachers. You know, and you know, because there's you know, and teachers, and then Paul later, in Timothy, teachers, I think it's Timothy, but teachers will be judged more strictly. Because yeah, you know, just listen to it. It was like there was so many. It was so like so patchwork together, the logic that he's sort of trying to utilize in order for him to make a case for the phonetic sound. It seemed to me like, okay, he's convinced that the phonetic sound of God's name is the most important thing. And so he set out to clarify that and to insist that anybody who's not using it is in effect worshiping some other God. You know, so yeah, you know, in the video when they were talking about like Jehovah, you know, for instance, and you might be
Mhm.
getting into that, so I won't, you know, if you don't, I'll
Mhm.
talk about that later. But yeah,
Yeah.
you know, it just seemed like I had a immense sense of empathy, but at the same time, it was just like, man, we have to have a greater reverence for God, because in his seemingly sincere attempt to educate people, I mean, it's just off the rails. So yeah, I guess those are my kind of general
Okay.
thoughts about it without getting into the
Right.
deep the details and stuff. So
Cool. Definitely appreciate that. So right off the bat, what I want to discuss from that clip is the idea that somehow the Koine Greek is the language or script of the elite, right? So
you caught that too, huh?
yeah. So I'm like, I wasn't gonna let that go. So this is a book entitled A Historical Greek Reader, Mancinian to the Koine Coven by Stephen, publisher, Oxford University Press. Well, his name is Stephen Coven, I should say. So Chris, if you couldn't be so kind to read this.
The Koine is essentially an expanded international variety of Attic, heavily influenced by Iconic One. Its roots go back to Athens in the period following the Persian Wars, as the city became the dominant cultural and political force in the Aegean. Both the high, literally, and the low vernacular stands of Hellenistic Greek can be traced to this period. On the one hand, high literature and culture in Athens came under increasing Ionic influence. Literally, prose and poetry use Ionic words and inflections, and the educated elites started to adopt some Ionic idioms in speech.
Continue.
On the other, the Athenian Empire made Athens a hub of trade and military activity, with a high degree of interaction between Athenians and the Ionian allies. There is no doubt that the cosmopolitan character of the city, which the old oligarch complains about in the famous passage, left its mark on the language of the working urban population, many of whom will have been the lowest naval class. A
Right.
historical Greek
So
reader. Yeah.
right. So both tiers of the civilization used the Koine Greek. It wasn't a highfalutin dialect and or script that only the elites use. As you see here, those of the lowest naval class, you know, urban populations. You know, it wasn't just the high and the mighty. So I just
Yeah.
wanted to clarify that.
I caught that, but I just assumed that they were gonna I just assumed like, all right, they must be trying to allude to something specific that they aren't making clear. You know,
Right.
because I thought the same thing. Like in the East, everybody use Greek because it's like the language of
It was
trade.
the lingua franca, right?
Everybody uses Greek, and it really is the West with the Latin where you really get the the highfalutin
Right.
aristocratic separation more so than the Greek. And it would make
Right.
sense. It made more sense to like, okay, well maybe in Jerusalem, because Hebrew is or is the primary language, that they were bilingual. But I would still imagine everybody's bilingual because everybody that's the place
Right.
where all the Jews are very fierce about their ancestry,
Right.
and then that's the place where you still got to trade.
Right.
Yeah.
And also in the video, the guy says, "Yeah, I know it's Greek, but the ancient Israelites spoke Greek." That is true. The ancient Israelites had no issue speaking Greek or reading Greek, for that matter, right? So the video that Maycha'al was sharing comes from this video, and it's from again, Maycha'al. I don't know the exact title this person has for you. I don't know if he's your mentor, leader. I don't know what you call him, so please forgive me. So I don't know. On YouTube, he goes by Ravenous Bird, right? And the name of the video that Maycha'al shared in his video is archaeological find proof that God's name is Yahweh, amazing. So I want us to look at what he wrote, Ravenous Bird wrote in the subtext of this video. And it says here, there was never any confusion or controversy about how to pronounce the divine name during the 1st century, or earlier for that matter. The confusion only begins after 70 CE when biblical Gabaret, biblical Hebrew, begins to die out as a spoken language. Greek was the 1st century what English is today. You could use Greek letters to write Hebrew words and thereby capture the phonetics of the native pronunciation. Professor James Talbot and Professor James Charlesworth realized this firsthand when they examined the ossuary chest from the 1st century CE that was found having the divine name inscribed on it, but transliterated phonetically into Greek. Note that the letters Omicron and Omega are the same vowel. Omega was just held slightly longer before vowel length dropped out of Greek. The divine name is correctly pronounced Ya'ol and nothing else. This trumps all the professional and amateur guesswork that has been done since the 19th century. Now, whether or not you agree with the pronunciation of the divine name, that's not the issue that I want to address. The thing I want to address is actually very encouraging, because it seems here that he has no issue. Mr. Ravenous here has no issue with transliteration. See, I was under the impression that Maycha'al had an issue with transliteration. He actually doesn't, right? He actually does not, because here he talks about how the name inscribed on it, but transliterated phonetically into Greek. Not a problem. So I found that very interesting. So, okay, so the issue isn't transliteration. So not only does he doesn't have a problem, the Jews who created the Pentateuch didn't have a problem either, because it says here in the Oxford Handbook of the Septuagint, page 17, the earliest literary witness to the Greek Pentateuch is the Jewish historian Demetrius, the chronographer, an Alexandrian who likely flourished in the last quarter of the 3rd century BCE. Fragments of his work, preserved by later authors, invents a detailed knowledge of the Greek version. Half a century later, a Jewish historian by the name of Epolemius was active in Palestine. Extant fragments of his work, written in a crude Greek style, also exhibit dependence on the Greek text. It thus seems that a relatively stable form of the Greek Pentateuch was in circulation before the turn of the 2nd century BCE and was consulted by learned Jews. So here we have the Hebrew Bible that was translated and transliterated, from Hebrew and Aramaic to the Greek. And prior to the times of Jesus, right, the Septuagint was considered the text to be studied by learned Jews. Jewish people had no problem at looking at their sacred text from a Greek script. They had no problem. And neither does Maycha'al, which I actually, that's great, because no one had an issue. Paul the Apostle never had an issue writing Koine Greek. The writers of the Pentateuch and readers of the Pentateuch also had no problem with the Koine Greek. And they also don't have a problem with the transliterating of certain, titles and names. So again, transliteration is the process of transferring a word from the alphabet of one language to another. Transliteration helps people pronounce words and names in foreign languages. Unlike a translation, which tells you the meaning of a word that's written in another language, a transliteration only gives you an idea of how the word is pronounced. And as we saw by the video he shared, the gentleman, were transliterating with the Greek and using that to phonetically sound out the name of God, the God of the Bible. And they don't have an issue with that. And neither do we. We are in agreement here, which is great. There's no issue here thus far, right? The issue is, then why are you having an issue with the letter J if you're having no issue with transliteration? Because here, in the book Letter Perfect, The Marvelous History of Our Alphabet from A to Z, it says, Such is the story of J, our 10th letter in alphabetical order, but historically one of the last two letters with V to join the Roman alphabet. Ancient Romans of AD 100 had 23 letters only, no J, V, or W. Ancient Latin had no sound J, hence no letter for it. The J sound arose later in European speech. Because remember, right? Transliteration is try to sound out a name or a word using another script. But here, there was no need for a J in the first century because there was no sound that this J would make. So there was no need for a J if the sound that the J makes wasn't being used in pronouncing things. This happens later on in European speech because script and language evolves through time. So the transliteration would also have to change with the times. Chris, you want to say anything before we continue?
No, we're good.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
Actually, if you could read this for us, Chris.
All right. In English spelling, J had arrived in 1640. Nevertheless, over the next 200 years, J was not recognized universally as a separate letter, but for reasons explained below, was viewed by some as a variant of the letter I.
Right. This is very interesting. The J was just a I variant. Right? That's how they saw the J. It wasn't too much later that it became its own character. Prior to that, the J was considered just an I variant. And we know that in the Greek, no one had an issue with the letter I. Go ahead, Chris.
J was born from I.
It comes from I. There's no nefarious secret cabal that met in the cave somewhere and said, we're now going to create this letter J. Bruh. That's not what happened here. Right? The J came from I. Many modern uses of the English J go back to Latin consonantal I. The Roman gods, whom we call Jupiter, Juno, and Janus, actually had Latin names. Jupiter, yeah, Jano, and Janus.
And Janus, right?
Right. So when they saw the I, they pronounced it with what we will now call the Y. Right. And there's another word that Maycha'al used and showed us that also has this Greek I. Right. So in the video, they show the word God, right? And it has the I. And that's why they say Yah-O. If you remember the guy in the video, he said, oh, this is from, the name of God, Yah-O. And here's another clip, again, showing another engravement. That's an I. That's Yah-O. Right? So let's talk a little bit about Yah-O. Chris, if you could be so kind.
There's evidence that at least one Greek from the proper name of the Jewish god was known among pagans for a few centuries before the Christian era. For instance, two classical authors from the mid-1st century BCE were accustomed to the form ale of the Tetragrammaton. It was likely pronounced originally as Yahoo, a vocalization impossible to accurately represent in Greek due to its inherent linguistic restrictions, like the inability to represent a medial H sound, as transcriptions into Latin and Demotic Coptic indicate.
Okay, continue.
Nevertheless, it is assumed that this was not widespread knowledge among the many Greek readers who most likely read it simply as it was written, Yah-O. Much ink has been consumed as to whether this form is due to the northern or southern Israelite pronunciation and whether the Tetragrammaton is more original in its shorter or longer version. More specifically, the Greek historian Diodorus of Sicily,
Yeah.
Diodorus of Sicily, while mentioning a catalog of national lawgivers and their deities, also refers to the Jews, Moses, and the God who is invoked as Io or Yael. This reference seems to denote that at the time it was known that there was a rather unhindered invocation of the divine name among Jews.
Right. So we see this term being used. Of course, other terms used to indicate God's name were also used. And this is not a video about who had the most accurate pronunciation for the name of the God of the Bible. But we see here that when you read the Greek, the IAO, that when they read it, they pronounced Yao, right? You don't have a problem with the I. You don't. You don't have a problem with transliteration, and you don't have a problem with the I. So you really shouldn't have a problem with the J, because modern scholars trace pronunciation shifts by analyzing variant spellings in late Latin writings and general spellings in early Romance writings, such as the Old French Strasbourg Oath of 842. Studies showed that the Y sound of consonantal I slurred gradually to new sounds, involving a more relaxed tongue position. These changes affected the sense of the letter I. No longer were its vowel and consonant sounds logically linked as in ancient Rome. Now, there were two unrelated sounds. Letter I had become really two sounds sharing one written shape, a first step toward its eventual split into a second shape. So as pronunciation changed, the script has to identify that change, because language and scripts evolve through time. Europe's spoken languages was setting down as written forms in their own right, alongside literary Latin, and the part-time use of the letter I had come to seem inadequate for the frequent sound J in French and in English and French, or H in Spanish. The need was felt for a new letter to symbolize more authoritatively the new sounds. And remember, transliteration is about the how to sound out the origin language to the target language. So the way people spoke and pronounced was different. The script has to match that difference, right? Meanwhile, there existed in European writing a variant shape for a minuscule letter I. Scribes working within certain handwriting traditions, typically in medieval Latin, for religious or legal documents, had for centuries been drawing an elongated I with a tail hanging below the baseline, right? Starting by 1500, that was the variant letter shape, and variant letter sound gravitated toward each other. Gradually, the J became reserved exclusively for the consonantal sound J, right? So the J was an I with an accent. And as time progresses, like, we need to use this more and more to dictate how you should pronounce this word. Instead of the ya, it's the j. So they needed a character that represents that sound. So they used a variant of the letter I to do that with. And your thoughts, sir?
Yeah, oddly enough, however, whatever you think originally was the name that Yahweh Yahweh spoke to Moses at the burning bush, whatever you think that is, it seems unmistakably clear that the Jews developed a tradition over time, that by the time of the second temple, that they thought it was virtually disrespectful to say whatever name that was. And so
Right.
this is, why they developed the Tetragrammaton. And again, that's not this isn't to argue that we should, revere utilize the Tetragrammaton or any such thing like that, or how they created that reminder that where they took the vowels from Adonai and they took the Tetragrammaton and put them together and came up with Jehovah, which is what we early translators originally thought that this was the name of God, Jehovah, when in reality it was just a reminder to them to not actually say the name. It was a visual reminder. When you see that those two words placed together, the vowels from Adonai and the tetragrammaton, the consonants from the name of God put together, don't say the name. That's the whole point of it. So yeah, so to me, it just seems like he seems to be making a mountain out of a molehill, because throughout the history of Scripture, there seems to be a very clear tradition that it's not necessarily about the name as much about the reverence of who that name is. And there's many different ways that they treated it, whether they were calling him Lord, or they were using the tetragrammaton, or they were using, Yahuwah, whatever it was, there were many different ways that they described it. And then, as you pointed out aptly, this whole, he doesn't have an issue with the I. Like, why are you forcing the Y instead of utilizing the I, which was even there in the Greek?
Right. So again, there's no disagreement with transliteration. He agrees with it. He understands what it is. Right. So it's not ignorance. He's not ignorant of what transliteration is. But for some reason, he has an issue with the letter J. But ironically enough, in this video, he actually tells us he also doesn't have a problem with the letter J. And we're going to look at that clip right now. Mr. Detroit, if you could go to the 36-minute, 15-second mark.
Okay. And this, and share, and
Hebrew. And he was called Yeshua. Now, yes, Y and I and all these letters came in at some point in the alphabet. The point to this is not when these when these letters were formed. That's not the point. The point is that I'm not going to get rid of Jump and Jim and John and Jamaica and all these different things, letters sounding name joints and all these different things. I'm not going to get rid of that now, because my culture and evolution of the culture and the letter J has brought me to this point. So I'm not going to get rid of these things. But if I'm seeking truth from the origin, I got to go back now and said,
he doesn't have a problem with the letter J. He's like, I'm going to keep these words, the jump, the Jamaica, the joints, I'm not throwing those away. He said, I'm keeping those. All those words that start with the letter J, not a problem. But if I want to know the truth, then So these other words that start with J are lies, and you're comfortable with a certain percentage of lies in your life. That's weird. But again, he doesn't have a problem with transliteration. He doesn't have a problem with the letter I, and he doesn't have the problem with the variant of I, which we now call J, because you heard the man himself. Hey, Jamaica, joint, jump. I'm keeping those. I'm keeping those words. But the problem is Jesus. It's Jesus. And it's not the letter J in Jesus. It's whatever definition or trigger he has when he hears the name Jesus. And to a certain extent, I can understand why. Because many atrocities have been done in the name of Jesus. These are facts. Many people have been oppressed, tortured, killed. Families have been ripped apart. Land has been taken in the name of Jesus. The problem is we conflate the atrocities with the actual person of Jesus. Just because they did these wicked things in his name doesn't mean that Jesus condoned any of those actions. You have to separate Jesus from these atrocities, because all you got to do is look at what these people did in his name and look at how Jesus behaved and taught, and you will see a wide chasm of difference between the two. Because I can also show you how families have been mended, marriages saved. We know that a lot of the great social services that we use today, like hospice care, hospital, the university, a place for the blind people, a place for people who have mental health issues. These were all created by Christians in the name of Jesus. With a J. With a J. So you have to look at the person, because it's weird, because part of the argument is because it's a J and we're transliterating the name different than how they would have the first century, therefore it's not the same person. But yet you don't have an issue with that when it comes to Ya'al, because those are Roman letters, the script of your oppressor. You have no problem there. And you have no problem with J, unless there's a ESUS that follows that J. So the issue is Jesus, not the J, what that word means to you. And listen, I get it. Has Jesus been weaponized? Has white Jesus been weaponized? Yeah, absolutely. Now, does that mean that every person that has a portrait of white Jesus is an agent for white supremacy? No. But we have to be honest and have to admit that it's been used as a weapon. The name Jesus has definitely been used in a very demonic fashion. But that doesn't mean that Jesus is demonic. And I applaud anyone who's trying to dig deeper into the text and get a better and more robust understanding. But we have to make sure that we do that without allowing our biases get in the way, which is a challenge for anyone, me included. Every time you open the text, you know who shows up right there with you? Your bias. You got to become self-aware and try to check your bias at the door. But that's something you learn to do. So again, you have no issue with transliteration. You have no issue reading the sacred text in Greek. And you have no issue with J. You have an issue. And that's why Maycha'al doesn't like the name Jesus. It's not the letter J. You don't like what that name brings up in your mind, in your conscious. And I get that. Me, as people of color on this panel, we understand that. But you cannot conflate the atrocities that has been done under his name with the actual person that we now, today, call Jesus. Apologies, your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, you said it, very aptly, and again, I just want to reiterate the point that, I have a deep empathy, for people that, seem sincere in their pursuit of, truth, and then on a particular topic, I have a admiration, for his desire to revere God so much that, he thinks that the exact name, whatever that might be, matters. I respect that and empathize with that. That said, I'm just it's frustrating and sad that we often think that we are qualified to teach others, and we lack. I think that shows a lack of reverence for God when we're delving into a field that is very rich and deep in information, and we kind of skip the surface, look at a YouTube video, maybe read a book, and think that we're qualified to teach others. I just think that we have to have a greater sense of the gravity of speaking on behalf of God. And I just want to encourage that brother to consider that.
Right. And we're not asking for you to do something that we don't have to do ourselves, and that's check our bias at the door. That's what you got to do. Yes, historically, people have used that name to do some horrific things to Black and brown folk. But Jesus didn't do those things. He didn't. He came and died for us so that we can have an opportunity to be with the God of Israel, the God that you love so much. So again, it's not ignorance. You know what transliteration is. You agree, that's fine. You have no problem using the I, and you have no problem using the J, unless it's Jesus. So listen, man, I hope this helps, but that's why I'm responding, is to help you understand that it's okay. Jesus is okay, you know, and even though you decided not to be my friend, I'm still here. And if you would like to be my friend again, the door is open, bro. Because I have no animosity towards you. I love you. You know what I mean? It's not beef. When I come and challenge some of the things that you teach, it's completely out of love. Because I want you back. I want you back in the kingdom. I really do. That's why me and Apologists in Detroit and many people in the US, that's why we do what we do. It's not so that we could pontificate and sound like we're brilliant people. I mean, some of us in the UA are brilliant people. I mean, you know, I'm amateur night. These people are amazing. But the end game is for everyone to pledge allegiance to Christ and become part of our family. I want you to be part of our family. I'm your friend. Though you don't want to be mine, that's fine. I'm going to be here. And if you ever decide to change your mind, I'm here. The door is open. You know what I mean? And again, bro, we actually agree a lot. We agree in transliteration. We agree on the letter I. We both agree on the letter J too. You know, it's just you have an issue with that word and the baggage you think it has. So I implore you to let that go and just look at the man for who he really is in the text. And yeah, that's my spill. That's my spill. Any final thoughts before we're out of here, Mr. Dr. Detroit?
No, I think you know him a little bit, and so I don't want to kind of step on what the passion in which you just shared your heart. So I'm good.
Cool. So yeah, guys. So thank you for coming by. Thank you for sharing. Maycha'al, I hope you take this well. You know, it's not about defeating you and I got you. It's not about that. It's about just helping you and helping anyone I can to come to the foot of the cross and to be a disciple of Jesus. That's what this video is about. So with that being said, Apologists in Detroit and BK signing off. Peace.